The Mexican-American War timeline includes the major events, battles, and treaties that shaped the course and outcome of the war. It also includes the events that helped cause the war, such as the Texas Revolution, and events that followed, like the Compromise of 1850 and the American Civil War. During his time in office, President James K. Polk, a firm believer in the idea of manifest destiny, oversaw the most significant territorial expansion in the history of the United States. The expansion was largely achieved through three events: the annexation of Texas in 1845, the Oregon Treaty of 1846, and the Mexican-American War. Collectively, these events led to the United States gaining control over the future states of Texas, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Washington, and Oregon, as well as portions of what would later become Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas, Wyoming, and Montana. Of the three events, the Mexican-American War was the most controversial and came with significant ramifications. The annexation of Texas sets the stage for the Mexican-American War. In the aftermath of the Texas Revolution, 1835 to 1836, Mexico threatened to declare war on the United States if it annexed Texas. Mexican officials were certain the United States had played a role in inciting the revolution and intended to annex the territory. Although there was support for adding Texas to the Union at the time, both President Andrew Jackson and President Martin Van Buren refrained from doing so. Neither of them wanted to engage Mexico. However, the United States did officially recognize Texas and carried on diplomatic relations. In 1844, President John Tyler restarted negotiations with Texas regarding annexation. On April 12th, the Texas Treaty of Annexation was agreed to, and Mexico responded by severing diplomatic relations with the United States. However, Tyler was unable to gain the support of the Senate, which defeated the treaty in June. Tyler subsequently lost the presidential election of 1844 to Democrat and pro-expansion candidate James K. Polk from Tennessee. Polk was a staunch believer in manifest destiny, the idea that the United States had a divine right to expand westward across the continent from sea to sea. Before he left office, Tyler tried again to annex Texas, but through a joint resolution of Congress. With Polk's support, Tyler was able to convince Congress to pass the Tyler-Texas Treaty on March 1, 1845. Texas was admitted to the Union on December 29, 1845, as the 28th state. Despite the annexation of Texas, Mexico did not follow through with its threat to declare war. However, the tension between the two nations increased due to a border dispute between Mexico disputed and Texas. According to Texas, its territory included significant portions of what is today New Mexico and Colorado, along with the western and southern portions of Texas itself. Texas claimed its territory extended south to the Rio Grande River. However, Mexico insisted the border only extended to the Nueces River, which is north of the Rio Grande, and severed diplomatic relations with the United States. President John Tyler portrait. Taylor moves into the disputed territory on the Rio Grande River. In July 1845, President Polk ordered the commander of the U.S. Army in Texas, General Zachary Taylor, to move into the disputed territory between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande River. The following November, Polk sent Congressman John Slidell to Mexico to negotiate with the Mexican government and purchase the disputed areas along the Texas-Mexican border, the territory that makes up the present-day states of New Mexico and California. However, the Mexican government rejected Polk's offer. the United States declares war on Mexico. In May 1846, news of skirmishes between Taylor's men and Mexican troops reached Washington. Polk used it as his advantage and convinced Congress to support a declaration of war against Mexico. However, Polk failed to mention that Taylor's men were on the banks of the Rio Grande River, which Mexico claimed was its territory. On May 13, 1846, the United States declared war on Mexico. Trist negotiates the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Following the capture of Mexico City in September 1847, Nicholas Trist, chief clerk of the Department of State and Polk's emissary to the Mexican government, started negotiations for a peace treaty. The terms he offered were similar to what Slidell presented in 1846. As the presidential election of 1848 came closer, Polk grew concerned with Trist's conduct and public support for the war. First, Polk was worried Trist would not press the Mexicans for terms that favored the United States. Second, Trist was an ally of General Wincott Scott, a Whig who was believed to be a contender for the party's presidential nomination. Polk recalled Trist to Washington in October.